Town of Stockbridge Finance Committee meeting. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our Finance Committee, to thank each one of you for your continued participation, dedicated service and support. And I do this in light of our entering the fiscal year 25 operating and capital budget cycle. I'd also like to thank Michael Canales and the department heads for their role in the development of the budget documents for fiscal year 25. And also, I'd like to thank the support of the select board for their input and support of us as a committee. And I would like especially to thank and give our appreciation to Gary Johnston, the moderator, who was appointed each of you. And we really have a very cohesive and exceptional group here. And every one of our members possesses background in either individual or corporate finance. And a number of our members have served in government. So thanks to Gary for his effort there. Now, I've circulated everybody an agenda. What we have, the first item on the agenda, minutes from October 2nd. That, if you will recall, was the school merger meeting. This is the first meeting that we've had since that. I've circulated those minutes. Are there any questions on the October 2nd meeting?
I move their acceptance.
I'll second it. With one comment.
Anybody opposed?
Wait a minute.
All in favor?
He's got
I
to.
said with a comment, it was a great opportunity missed when you reread these.
I know.
Actually, have to tell you, there were two typos that Georgia picked up that I will clean up before they get posted.
I caught the typos too, but I didn't want to bother you with them because the meaning of what you were saying was
I
fine.
can't help it.
And also, it's now completely irrelevant.
Exactly.
Well,
All of it.
I'm not sure it's irrelevant, but let's not, this is something that's going to come back. Okay.
Not in our lifetimes.
No, I wouldn't be so sure. We may take a little bet on that. Okay.
Our lifetimes. I'm going to say, I was involved in.
I know.
And
The basic purpose of our meeting this evening is to talk about,
you didn't ask for a vote.
what's that?
You didn't ask for a vote.
I did ask for a vote. I said all
We didn't
in
vote.
favor of the meeting minutes. Anybody opposed? So that's unanimous. Okay. The principal purpose of our meeting this evening is to discuss two things. First thing, the first draft, thanks to Michael, of the operating budget for the town that includes not only the departments, but also education. And the second is a preliminary discussion of our capital requests for fiscal year 25. And as a result of our discussion this evening, we want to move into the next phase and basically talk about what meetings do we have with whom, with various department heads and anything that we want to pursue further. So basically, Michael has circulated to everybody. Welcome, Stephen. Michael has circulated to everybody a copy of our operating budget and capital requests. And in this document, it's interesting to note that Michael will take us through it. The budget has increased 5.5% over fiscal year 24. And the increases range from general government and public safety and education and public works. These are some salary issues and also the compactor and also discussion of Tri-Town Health we'll have. And basically, we'll talk about the draft. Michael, you want to put it up? And we'll go through it. And just highlight where the changes are. So that's what we have in mind, and more to follow. Operating budget, page 1.
You guys have all the slides right in front of you.
You can look at your books and you'll see it all.
Yeah.
But basically, under general government, the overall change in general government is an estimated $17,311. And Michael, do you want to take us through the changes here?
And I will, just full transparency, because I don't want, the only reason why that's as low as it is you'll see that the assistant treasurer collector's salary is reduced by 52,422. Now, that was an operational decision made. We moved the assistant treasurer, Christine Ganotti, down to the highway, water, and sewer departments to act as the business manager for those departments. The main duty that she was doing up here was the water and sewer commitments. So we figured use her down there. Myself, Hugh, and her worked on communication with Mass DOT, and she was very much a big help in staying on them and pestering them, and was one of the main parties involved in getting the sidewalk from Pine Woods to the rest. So that we had an immediate payoff in making that switch. But what that does is it takes 52,000 out of the general government and moves it down to the public works. So that's a shifting of funds. So, it made it look like general government didn't go up, but it was more of a transfer of what the position would be used for. And we think that it's going to pay out very well in that regard. We've stepped up measures here to use the staffing that we have, using the assessor's clerk. She's also assisting the treasurer's office, so we have coverage when we're out. So right now, we haven't seen any reduction in services that we provide, but we've been able to really free up the staff, the head people down at the DPW to pursue their primary jobs instead of worrying about office paperwork. And I think that so far it's really been beneficial, and she's done an outstanding job in that role. But like I said, I did want that full transparency. And, just to let you know, we had contracts across the board. We had union negotiations across the board, which obviously dictated a lot of what we did with the personnel and the rest as far as that. So significant changes in this year's budgets that we haven't had in the last couple of years overall. So like I said, that was the big change. Are there any specific questions in the general government section that you would like me to delve into further at this point, or do we want to go through? I figure we stay on the big categories right now, and then unless there's specific
Right.
questions. If not, I'll move on to public safety. Once again,
That's your police.
yep,
negotiations
building
contract.
departments and the rest. Once again, a lot of salary adjustments in there. We also, you'll notice that the building inspector salary is reduced 50,855. But then there's building inspector expenses jumped up by 84,000. So once again, just to fully explain, that 84,000 is what we're paying into. We joined a 4-town building inspector department that we set up. This, even though it looks like we're paying more, it actually took an insurance policy out of, which is $20,000 out of for health insurance, because that's being billed through the towns, through this 4-town.
It's a shared
It's a
job.
shared service, just like Tri-Town, except instead of through League, the employees are all employees of Great Barrington. And then we just pay an assessment, but the assessment includes not just the salary, it includes all fringe benefits, retirement, and everything else. When you put those together, we're actually saving a few $1,000s.
How's it
So,
working?
It's working okay. The main problem that we've had is that we still only have Matt and Ryan as the inspectors. We have two more that look like they're gonna pass, so they have to get approved by the state to be inspectors. There's a program. If everything works out, we should have two more starting, which will give us up to full staff. And then we'll really be able to tell how the programs truly run. Matt is incredibly knowledgeable, building commissioner. He's a fully licensed building commissioner. And Ryan, who does the other work, is a fully certified building inspector. And between the two of them, they've been able to keep all four towns afloat, current on all the permits. But we do know we need to staff up because we're coming in the construction season.
Right.
And it's gonna get a lot busier in only a couple more months.
4 towns, Stockbridge, Great Barrington,
Lee,
Lennox.
Yep, and it allowed us to hire 4 people instead of 5 that normally would have. And allowed us to also bring all the wages up that we were paying people to make it competitive. And then also provide us a structure so if one inspector does leave, it's not an individual town scrambling to find or competing against each other. Because we all looked at each other and said, we're either gonna compete for the head person or we can just come together. So I think overall, it's really worked. And while I said, it looks like it's 34,000 more, we bring in dental, health, retirement, all the costs, the fringe benefit costs, it's actually works out to be a couple thousand that we're actually gaining or more or less a wash. So I do think overall it's pretty good. You'll notice police department expenses are down 73,000. I have recommended that the police cruiser become a capital expense. I understand it was put into the budget, we just buy one every year. But it fits all the criteria of a capital item. And I'm not sure, maybe there's a rationale behind it if this board or the select board wants to tell me why it was brought in as a budget line item. Because this year is a skip year, would be a skip year, but they want to buy radios. So the radios to me should be.
Shall I tell you why?
Sure,
Why we did it?
yes.
Because every year we were approving, or every other year, as part of a special article.
Right.
And we were very interested in reducing the number of special articles for recurring expenses. Because it just, from our perspective, it made no sense to build a budget based on having separate votes for what appeared to be recurring expenses. That was the rationale behind it.
All right.
Okay?
Yep.
Subject to change at all times.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, do we want it, where do we want it to hit now as part of the budget? And whether or not we should be evaluating as we move to hybrids and others, is a 4-year flip of the vehicles a proper number of years to flip? Or should we be looking at what warranties we can get on them, what the rest, and whether or not we should.
Too soon to tell.
I've got a question, Michael. The total of 200,000, 201,000 in that column
Yep,
is not the total of the column. Which is more like 52,000.
yes, so thank you for pointing that out.
Mhm.
I just fixed it, it's 54,000, thank you, yes. I didn't change that field from the year before when I added a column, so thank you for.
They had this addition function in Excel. You might have heard about it.
Yeah. Yep, yep. When you drop a new
Good.
column in, sometimes that formula didn't move over. So, yeah. Thank you for that, Cap. It's 54,000, yeah. And one of the things I actually have a notes page as I make adjustments, as I catch errors and I'm having other staff look things over, because this is the first draft of it. And noting change. I'm just gonna do a quick note.
So the increase is 54,000,
51,714.
51,714.
All right, I will correct that, and you'll be getting, so I'm keeping notes, as you can see up here, when I make changes, as we consider different things that are coming in that I may have made an error here as we're scrubbing through this, or if some changes have come in because we've noticed some things that need to change since the first draft. I am identifying which sheet was changed, what the rationale for the change was, and you guys will be getting this note page, plus you'll be getting the updated individual pages as we go along. So thank you for that one.
Education.
Yeah. Education, so here's a question on this one also. And this, I know I've talked about with select board for a little bit, is whether or not we're gonna have 3 more years of vocational tuition, and whether or not we wanna do the vocational tuition as part of the budget, or do we wanna do it as part of a free cash appropriation? Do we think it's gonna be ongoing? Do we think it's not? Depending on what happens with the school, we might not be facing vocational in a few years.
Isn't this just
I-
one student?
Two
I think,
students,
In what grades, do you know?
they're freshmen this year. That's kind of.
it would seem to me that, my opinion, that we keep it under the educational component until Berkshire Hills builds their vocational program, which is in development right now. Otherwise, it kind of convoluted to me anyway.
But this isn't vocational. I mean, it's vocational, but it
It's
may not,
education.
it may not be one of the vocational areas that is.
That is true.
May not be the one that's.
That's right. They're only going to,
Kids,
you're only going to be 4 vocational areas.
yeah.
Well, then we'd even need it on the second.
Well,
The other one, which had
you
much
know,
more.
in the merged school, it would have been 6,
Yeah,
but this is only going to be 4. So
That would speak to keeping it under education, I would think.
It's more where you want to pull the funding from. Do we want to pull it from, say, free cash appropriation that we have, or do we want to just put it in the budget?
the only thing I would say to that is that until we've had a thorough discussion about the capital stuff
Yeah,
and about what and how we're going to pay for various capital items, we ought to keep the free cash available and not spend it quite yet.
Right.
So I wonder if we could just defer having a discussion about this item until we've talked about the capital items.
yeah, that makes sense. We can tie it all into a just overall discussion for the capital. Yeah.
Jay, unless I hear other thing, I just want to oppose the idea of moving that to free cash. I think educational expenses should be under the title of education. That's just my opinion.
it is education. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
It's not.
It would seem to
You
me
start
that
moving things all over, pretty soon you can't keep track of it.
we should keep it under education for the time being
I agree.
until we see what the new school, how that generates the vocational.
I agree.
Okay. So include the 80,000.
Michael, this number fiscal 25, 797. Specific operating budget
Yeah,
doesn't agree with the school committee.
that was the one I was sent. That's the number I was sent.
And it's been
by
changed
Sharon.
some-
So unless they changed it again, so this school budget number will not stay the same. The cherry sheet numbers that are in your revenue page will not stay the same.
Right.
There's a bunch of things in here that are going to be changing as the school goes through its budget process.
Right. And the budget hasn't been finally approved.
No.
Yet.
Correct. But
But even
I just noticed it's not the same number as,
is on page 17 is different too. It's more.
page 17.
3.8.
Well, it almost makes no sense to be looking at
Yeah.
numbers until
Yeah.
the school committee
right.
has made its decision. So
Yeah.
I'd say we defer
Yeah.
this discussion
Yeah.
until we have more finite numbers.
I agree.
Public Works.
So here's probably one of the areas that you're gonna see the biggest change from in previous years. So this is around bringing all the costs of water and sewer into the water and sewer departments. This includes now sewer debt and principal being listed here, and the rest. And that goes with, now that we are doing a rate justification, that we're establishing what the rate is based on the actual expenses of the department. And if it's outside of between 85 and 100%, if the income exceeds the expenses, then we'll make changes either up or down on the rate. So this is the new way of doing it. And specifically, it is the correct way of doing the way the sewer and water were established when they were put together. So, yeah. And those we can talk about a little further by going into those sheets. If you guys want to dig into those sheets, we can dig a little bit into the rate justification sheets and why. But that's where you see some of the biggest changes in how this budget looks for this year.
I think the key issue here, and we need to spend a little time on this, is the transfer station.
Yes, and I was just going
Michael.
to say that. The transfer station is going to become, it is probably, well, within the next 3 years, it will be larger than the water department. So
The budget,
the budget
yes.
or the transfer station
Now Christine's salaries
are coming out of highway,
are coming out of
a
highway,
third out of.
and they're in here, they're in the in the salary numbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And that also is why, that's why I wanted to point that out.
That's a good hire, by the way.
We think it's working. Everybody
She's-
thinks it's working.
Can't say enough good things about her. Christine Griati.
What is she?
Christine Giorgetti. You're talking.
Griati.
Oh, Riati, right.
She was our assistant treasurer, working out of the treasurer's office, and she did
Right.
water and sewer commitments. We
Oh.
moved her down to highway. She still does that component. And
Mhm.
she's been able to become the office manager for the 3 departments that are.
Oh, she's talented.
I think the issue here with respect to the transfer station is several-fold. One, the cost of transporting materials has gone up substantially, okay? Disposing of
It went from $92 per ton for municipal solid waste to $128 per ton for municipal solid waste. And the new contract is 5% or the CPI for transfers, stations and dumps. So the silver price index, whichever is greater. So because Casella and them are not going to get stuck like they were the last 2 years with actually basically losing money because they were locked into contracts with only 2% increases, but the increase to trash has become a little bit out of control. So all of our trash goes to Albany or goes all the way up to the top of New Hampshire. I believe there's only one, there might be 2 active landfills left in the state of Massachusetts. And as time goes on and these other ones possibly close, the trash is going to have to go to the Midwest. And you're going to see costs just continue to accelerate in this one area. And it's very easy if you go Google just cost of trash or anything, there's stories written about it and the rest, it's going to become
So
expensive.
I think the key issue here is this. Number one, the costs are up. People buy stickers for the transfer station. Should these people who support the stickers in the transfer station pay an increased fee? Do we leave the increased cost as part of the operating expenses for this area? Or do we have a commercial?
It's what I'd like to dig into a little more in a moment.
There's
The
enough,
rest of it.
how do we account for this?
The sticker price has to go up.
Well,
Well,
that's a debate.
Yes and no.
We just want to have that debate now or?
Okay, I'm,
No, I don't think this is the night to do it because
not
this is,
at all.
it's a moving number.
Right.
And at some point, the pain may
well,
dictate.
I was thinking that at some point, people start going back to private haulers and putting garbage cans at the end of their driveway.
It's
hauling
gonna be
fees.
more expensive.
It's going to be even more expensive because the private hauling fees are going to go up,
Okay, well, that's good news.
you know?
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, competition is not, we don't have a lot of competition for price.
We only have like four.
so why wouldn't we raise the sticker price?
Well, maybe we will, but at some point, there's a point at which there's a choke point. And we don't know what's going to happen with the existing landfills. And if this stuff has to be transported to Michigan or even further west, the carting fees are going to drive the prices up so high
Right.
that loading it all onto the sticker users, as opposed to including it in the tax rate as a municipal service, that's going to be the push-pull. And it isn't going to be our decision in any event.
I think,
As opposed to a town decision?
Yeah, it's a town decision. It's not our decision.
Michael's point is good, where we should defer an involved discussion on this at this point.
Yeah,
It's too premature.
I'm happy to be informed about it as
Yeah.
time goes on, but I'm not ready to make a decision.
And I'll tell you, across the Berkshires, it's everything from in the tax rate completely to completely paid by users.
Yeah,
So it's one or the other. Casella is really the only outfit now in the Berkshires. You know, I know you say there's 4 or 5, but they have to take their stuff to the same places and they can't get the rate that Casella can get
No.
for the volume.
Mhm.
And they've put out, they basically put out everybody. So, and it's all getting consolidated around them and it's just the cost. It's going to accelerate in the very near future.
Jim Balkance may have a comment. on
Well,
this.
the only comment I have, and I heard it earlier, is that I agree with the idea. We're going to reach a tipping point on this sticker cost. Because when it reaches a certain point, you're going to find trash all over roadsides and everything, which we had some time ago, if you remember, Georgia.
we,
And we did.
Oh.
And if we raise that sticker cost too much, we're going to have that same problem.
Oh,
So I think when we get around to discussing it, I think that's a point we need to really consider and recommend to the voters.
people were upset when it went from $1 to $5, then 25, it was like,
oh my heavens.
right.
It's 50 here. I know it's 350 in Great Barrington.
Barrington, sure.
Yeah.
Trash drop off.
Right.
And the
They're only
interesting
open like
part is,
4
I
hours a
know
week.
I pay
Right.
close
They're only
to
open.
$800 a year to
No.
get rid of my trash in North Adams.
How much?
About $800.
Is that on your?
And I bring it myself. That's a 65 sticker and you get charged every time you go over the scale, a minimum of $10. And depending on how much the weight of the trash, and I hate to say it, my wife runs a daycare and those diapers weigh a lot. So typically I'm paying anywhere from $14 to $20 a load to bring trash there. And it's just the
That's a
reality,
sticker.
and they have the same rate we got of 128 a ton. So it's, and I know they charge 149 to that $20 difference to make up for the operation of the staff and the rest and cover the whole thing. So trash is
To
going to
be
be expensive
continued.
and it's got to be continued.
We're not gonna-
A lot of discussion,
Exactly.
and probably discussion that's going to be quite a bit happening over the next number of years because it's probably going to be the most accelerating piece in our budget.
Yeah.
Continually now for the next couple of years.
Human
Well,
resources,
we could burn it.
human services.
It's interesting, well, there was an attempt to do that, of course, with solid waste disposal facilities that would generate electricity, but
Pittsville was the last one of the few running.
Springfield had one.
Yeah.
But they haven't,
Yeah, take it.
very uneconomic.
Right, right.
Human
A lot of
services,
people
Michael.
are concerned about the rising price of the transfer station. I'm going to save you some more money. The total on the human services is actually 31,790.
Yeah, I was wondering if I did that in a few other places and, yep.
So I'm trying to save the town some money wherever I can.
Ed, you're doing a great job.
What's that human services for what period was it
It's just the total, 31,790.
Yeah,
for fiscal year 24?
The increase.
No, for the difference.
Oh, 31.
59,000, it's 31,
What happened when I added the column for.
I got it.
31,790.
That's the
It's
difference.
it's calculating back to the 23 column, so it didn't automatically adjust and I didn't realize that, but it did it on some of them,
Although I
but
do realize that fixing the difference column doesn't change the overall budget.
yeah. Right, it doesn't.
I tried, but
This is just for your information over here. Yeah,
And
sure.
I'm going to be fixing that everywhere.
just take some of the pain away.
Yes.
Okay,
Why do we have to rent fire hydrants?
Those are fire hydrants that are fed by the Housatonic Water Works, not us. So, yes.
It's like renting a,
People's lives and we, where to get in. I don't know who to ask. There's no police officer downstairs either.
What's the
Can
matter?
I give you the key and we can just run it back to me?
I will absolutely do that.
All right, thank you.
We got 12 people.
Sorry about that.
down the hall.
Yeah, not sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm glad I'm here tonight.
I'm glad you are too. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt.
okay, so,
Humans,
anything else on human services at this point?
I really have a left field question here.
sure.
It has to do with Council on the Aging.
Yep.
I was told that the new girl has already resigned.
Yes.
Does anybody know why? Or we're not supposed to know?
Perhaps you might ask that question outside the meeting.
Yeah, and it's a person, typically we don't discuss.
It's not, it doesn't
Okay.
belong on the record
All right,
of this meeting.
okay.
That's a good question.
Okay, culture and recreation.
Big increase is the request from the library. I did add a sheet this year for the library request. Right after computer technician. So you can see what they're requesting and where their costs have substantially gone up on some of their areas and why they're asking for it.
Where is that?
It's right under computer technician.
I don't see computer technician. Where's that?
It's the tab, sorry. If you're looking on the sheets,
Yes,
it's should be just before the police, just before we switch to police. One thing I gotta figure out is how to number those pages.
police.
Information technology,
Yeah, information. You flip through your book, it should be like,
Library is on the next.
it's on the second page, right, it's the last item under the general government. Information technology,
yeah, sorry.
$120,000. You see it?
No.
No, oh, I see it.
Actually, the actual second page. About the breakdown, which is further.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm talking about the breakdown. If you want to see the breakdown,
Oh, I
it's
see.
At the
after
top.
the tab for computer.
Second page.
Right. Right at the top.
Michael, this total is also,
Yep, I'm fixing all
Right
these
here,
as we
right
go
here.
along now.
so I don't need to say anything else.
Yeah, I don't have to say anything else. I am
Oh.
fixing them now as we go along.
I see.
So what's behind the library increase? Are they hiring
I'll
people?
throw it up on the screen. So
Oh,
library.
it's not labeled.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Their employment's up 10,000, administrative is up 16,000, their books are up 11,000, expenses are up 5,000. And that gives them an operating budget now 630,000. You'll notice that their annual appeal is down about 40,000. And their memorial request is down. Their estimates on some of what they think they can earn is down quite a bit.
I can't do this with me.
What are they asking for?
Drop an annual.
How much?
Well,
They're asking for
part of
74,000.
the
Oh,
reason,
I haven't. Okay.
part of the reason here is that they had hired a person to be full-time development officer. And sadly, this person has had to resign in the middle of the year. And the development effort has suffered not as much as she's suffering right now. They are currently looking for a new development person, and you can't raise money these days without having
Very
a
dedicated.
professional fundraiser. So it's, one hopes that this corrects itself.
Yeah, it could be 1 year and.
Well, I think anyone associated with the library feels that way.
Is that-
Some of it also has to do with the aging of the community and the fact that so many people who previously supported the library have left town. Not having a place to live here anymore. That's an aside.
Yeah,
And so, I mean, that's a problem too.
but is that number that they're asking for, is that not down from?
No,
No.
no, it's not. The number has, if you go back and look, historically, the number over the past 10 years or so, actually even older than that, has ranged anywhere from 42.6% of their town budget coming from the town up as high as 46%. It's been in that range
Oh,
all along.
I just thought it was,
So remember, this is not a municipal library. So the town is not paying all of the expenses of the library as is the case in Barrington, Lennox. Hard to raise money these days.
I think from what used to be many, many years ago to where the library is today, obviously, it's done a phenomenal job of keeping the library viable. There's no question about it. And
You get no argument from me.
yeah, oh, I'm sure. So that's
Jim,
75. It's tough to raise money. There's no doubt about it.
And it's not easy to find development people.
Yes, that's right.
Bill, you know about this.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you.
You can see that obviously one of the changes was that for the sewer was moved up into the sewer category to, the rates.
What page are we on?
We're
We're
back.
still on
Service,
Okay,
right after the,
service.
got it.
Yep. One of the things is we have 100,000 remaining on trucks, fire trucks. And 50,000 this year, 50,000 next year, and it was discussed about just paying those off in order to lower the tax rate, which would be from free cash. That's the fire truck principle, which was shifted to a highway truck. We were just pulling annual bands and we just slid the highway truck in what fire truck was before. But we have 2 more payments left.
And there's no prepayment penalty.
Nope. No. So it's just to get the overall budget down, it was brought up as.
So not, I just have a question. So not all the water and sewer debt, the pumping station and the water tanks have gone over to under their departments?
No, not all of them. The ones that the town agreed originally to fund itself has stayed in the town section. The sewer pump station was brought on as strictly under water and sewer, and that one was moved over.
That was over, yeah, right.
So we
okay.
didn't move the ones that the town originally agreed to do itself and
Oh,
fund
okay.
100%.
All right, thank you.
On the next item, employee benefits, I noticed, Michael, we did not fund OPEB, other post-employee benefits. Did we get a statement from the actuary relative to
I haven't
the,
gotten it yet, should be getting it any time now. Last time we were in the 93%.
confidence level?
Yeah, you remember at one point we were up I think we were at 101. That was
Right.
97, then it was 93. So I'm expecting maybe a little better of a return because the stocks the last year have done better. That's because interest rates were higher. So we should see maybe a little bit better. I know it was brought up at the selectmen's of taking and beginning to use that money toward paying down the Medicare portion of, which is about 83,000. If you assume that we have $3.5 million, if we get a 3% return on the investment, it would pretty much cover the 83,000 that we pay annually in Medicare costs, which would lift it off the tax rate. So
But that's a restricted fund, isn't it?
it is, and that's one of the restricted uses that you can use it for.
You can use it for that
Yes.
purpose. Okay.
Yes. Yep, because it's generally assumed that once you hit 100%, that's what you would use as the interest to pay your
Okay.
Medicare and retiree, other post-employment benefits from it. And actually, there's no requirement to get to 100. It's basically, you can vote it at town meeting to pay. And what I did is just took the Medicare ones of what Medicare payments we have for retirees, and it's $83,007. So it is one of those that I know at least one selectman is gonna ask for that to be considered. And like I said, it shouldn't lower what we have in the overall trust, assuming that we get at least a 3% return over the next year on it. So, for the interest.
Okay,
Something worth considering, but it hasn't been decided by the select board to do that yet. If they do, then obviously we come to you guys to see if you support it or not.
the statement from the actuary would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. Town insurance, property and liability insurance is all increasing, automobile insurance.
Yeah,
I mean, that's standard business.
yeah,
Surprise.
yeah.
I just wanted to ask about the health and dental. Is that with the new rate of what,
Yes.
12% increase?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And it would have been higher, but that was, like you said, sort of one of the savings of that line would have been higher if we still had a regular building inspector. That's what I was referring to before. Yes, we already put those new rates in. We already did all that. Yep.
Okay, anything else at this point?
The total under the key budget categories, Michael, got total of 12.3 million. For the,
It'll be less because of Ed's calculation.
No, the only thing that changed was the difference column.
Okay.
It doesn't change. Like you said, he tried, but it didn't change.
Okay.
so what's the percentage increase from?
About 5.4%.
Thank you.
And then there's different things that we can consider in there, like I said.
Well, I think it's a remarkable effort to keep it that low.
Basically, yes, what would
Well,
approximately mill rate come out to?
Given where
So
other towns are.
Last year was wasn't it 9 something?
So
Okay.
right now,
Section.
the estimated tax, now obviously this is very early and all based on this
Right.
year's data,
Right,
and that it's $358 increase to the tax rate.
so what would that,
I mean, to the average tax bill.
okay,
And that,
all
it would
right,
go from 737 to 783. Now that is with the current values. There's definitely gonna be, just like last year, Mike Blay has already said, our assessments are gonna be going up.
it's a little premature to be,
Right.
want to get boxed in.
Yeah,
okay.
Jim, you had a point?
Well, I just had a question when I went through all of this and everything. I see blanks on the postage. Where are you covering the postage?
so I
There's
pulled
a
it.
substantial amount of postage that goes out of here.
So if you look under selectmen expenses, their line went from 2,300 to 15,000. I centralized that one.
Okay.
This, instead of, we would pull, if the postal meter needed a little bit extra, we pull from this department, from that department. It's like, we know what's coming out of town hall as a whole.
Under selectmen's.
It's under selectmen's expenses, and we did that actually last year.
Okay.
And so this is the second.
Missed
year
that.
Centralizing postage.
Oh, I missed that.
Okay.
Thank you, Georgia.
There's, like I said, there's still lots to discuss. This is just the first crack at the budget. Are there any questions to the general operational budget at this point?
Are there any department heads that we should meet with regarding the operating budget. Or, for example, Peter Dillon of the school of the Berkshire Hills.
Well, I think that meeting with Peter Dillon's always a good idea. But I would certainly wait until the school committee has finalized its budget. Because there's no sense in bringing him in here to discuss something that's not complete. As far as the new school, the potential new school is concerned, I think it's a little bit early.
Right.
Because you don't even have a schematic design. We have no idea what it's going to
The
cost.
only point being, I mean, this is almost a quarter of our.
No, I think it's a great idea. And I think that, I think it's also part of what will be Peter's effort to sell eventually the debt exclusion, which is going to have to be approved by the three towns as early as August of 2025, I think. So he's got some work to do.
Whatever he would tell us, eventually, it is what it is, goodly or badly.
Well, Diane, the only thing I'll say is that I serve on the school building committee. Thank you. Bill had the pleasure of serving on the merger committee. Thank you. And it's not yet clear what is going to be proposed. There will be choices that the towns will be presented with as far as, what the building's going to look like. Not the architecture, but
Right.
but whether or not it's, rehab, partial rehab, new building, and it's a little early for all.
Sure,
But it'll be interesting.
but in terms of its operation at this point, those numbers, some of the stuff that I peeked at
Yeah.
whenever Michael sent this out, and I was looking and I thought, well, okay, you can sit here and, argue till the cows come home, but it isn't going to do any good. Their budget, they know, it's going to be what it is and that's it, period.
75% of the budget for the school district is salary and benefits.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Virtually untouchable.
Right.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that the variables here are the variables of hard cost, the building cost itself.
Yeah, that.
Because nothing
yes.
else is good.
Right.
Nothing else is really going to change very much.
Well,
Right.
teacher salaries, teacher shortages, which causes increased salary.
I know. Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
mean, that's a big,
Yeah. Bill's point is absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely correct.
That's a big-
My comment about the total, we're in the 12 million. How would I say this one? From my own perspective in terms of cost, running a business rising, if I can relate that to this, the Stockbridge is pretty good, in my opinion. I mean, it's,
My household costs,
what?
if my household costs were only 5%, I would
Right.
increase.
Be
I would
pretty good.
I'd be
Yes.
pretty good.
Yes, that's exactly
I
right.
know that's your point.
With all the stuff that I hear out there and that I deal with, insurance, oil, blah, 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 salaries, oy boy. This is pretty good.
Yeah.
Any other conversation at this point on meeting with department heads for the operating budget? I hear none really at this juncture.
Not at this point.
Okay, Michael, you want to talk a little bit about some capital issues?
So one of the things, one of your tabs that I have nothing on it, pretty much the CPC one. We got tonight, so you'll be getting an updated CPC sheet from me. Because we have no appropriations right now, so it just looks like almost carrier. Big overall budget ballot, goes starting with the first $9 million in overall accounts. 1.1 million stabilization, 1.7 million in free cash, 3.8 million in the OPEB trust, 92,000 cemetery. Water surplus is 653, water sewer surplus 191, housing trust 220, chapter 90 120, and CPC 1.1 million. So
What about ARPA? We didn't, were there funds given to us for ARPA, ARPA?
we've spent one.
You spent them,
Yep,
okay?
yep, we had balances before, we have no balances now.
Just checking.
So those are the balances that we have. The usual going through, the next page is just where we are as far as all of our debt. That's when you see like the pump stations and the water treatment, that water treatment's done. The tank upgrade, that's still in the pump station, principal and interest. Those are our total ones. And then they get broken out depending on where they get funded from. Cemetery is 92,000 cemetery trust at this point, not planning on any expenses coming out of there. Then we get to the big one, free cash requests. This is where I think we'll have. So as always, I ask the departments, what do you need? Don't be shy, tell me what you need. Doesn't mean you're gonna get it, it just means what do you want? The fire department has asked for replacement of SCBA bottles, replacement of firefighting hoses and nozzles, and replacement of a positive, typo in there. Positive pressure vent fans, 13, 25, and 20. Police this year have the police replacement upgrade, 53,000, and then a new one that's shown up is the co-responder. So 2 years ago, we went in with Lee and Lennox on a co-responder program. This is to have somebody that goes to incidents that are more mental health related incidents that police have to deal with. The first 2 years of this program were funded by ARPA. So there's one of our uses of our ARPA funds. The third year is we're asking that the towns, all 3 towns are going to ask for it to be funded one more year. Well, because it's been a struggle to get it up and running. And now that we have it up and running and it's fully running, we also want to look into getting grants to continue it. And we'll be reevaluating as this year goes on. But we are asking all 3 towns to chip in one more time on this program. So this is the reason why you've seen it the first time. The other times the funds were approved by the selectmen through ARPA appropriations.
Is this an individual, the same individual for all 3 towns?
Yes. We don't have enough there's not enough demand in any one town. So in
Right.
order to
No,
make this type of program, and that 42,000 is for salary benefits,
Yeah.
all the costs of running that position. From the police chiefs, they're all in support of it. It helps when going to domestic violent cases and other things that they need mental
cheap at
health
the
assistance with.
What about
Give
the
them a
police
risk.
cruiser?
Excuse me?
We'll
Could be a
get to
risky
that
job.
one.
Yes, highly.
Because they're unarmed.
I know.
I'm saying this could be a very risky job.
Yeah.
I know they go with an officer. It's when called upon,
Yeah,
what the towns
right.
need. The officer has made an initial assessment and needs that support. And, it is one that, like I said, all 3 chiefs have recommended
Yeah,
for
no,
a
I get
year.
it.
And then we'll go from there. Next one is the debt. That one's put in by me is to pay off the debt, $100,000. Just get that off of our books. One of the things, do we want to consider dropping into a special stabilization fund and begin setting some of our free cash aside for bridge repairs? Recommending put $500,000 in a dedicated stabilization fund as we build toward what we have to do. I have put in I put in the initial expression of interest like I did last year and applying for a second year for 1.5 million from MassWorks to help with the Tucker. Didn't get it last year. We'll try again this year. And we'll be asking for $500,000 for a culvert, box culvert on 183. And then if the engineering's done, I'll be going after the next phase of the small bridge program for the second Everett Road of 600,000. If the engineering is not completed by the time the application period ends, then I have to wait till the following year to apply for the construction funds. So
Will that,
that's all fall in.
will that include the Glendale Middle Bridge?
No, that one is the second Everett Road.
Okay.
Right now,
Second Everett.
all that's happening with the Glendale Middle Road is we had enough funds available from the other bridge projects that we have done to fund. I have Ty and Bond doing the initial feasibility assessment of what our options are for the Glendale Middle Road. But I have no idea of costs or anything else at this point. I have contracted with them to get it done by the end of April, so it will be a last minute. It could be something possibly to come to this year's town meeting as far as the engineering to get it into a Chapter 85 review. But it won't be going after construction costs or anything like that. So that's one that might be dangling out there. That might be coming in toward the end of April is what would be the estimated cost of the engineering to get it in Chapter 85 review. So it takes about 6 to 8 months to get an application into Chapter 85. It can take up to a year to 8 months to get your approval for the bridge construction. So I'd like to get the engineering part moving and making an assessment on what our options are.
So did I hear you say it's unlikely that the second Everett Road Bridge will be worked on this year?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I've been up there doing the bore sampling, people.
They did the bore sampling,
And other things, so
Yeah.
once again, they have to do all the hydrology and everything else for the bridge, so it's in process, it's just, yeah.
no, that was my question too. How long have we been waiting on that bridge?
been a while.
It's crazy.
Well, you couldn't go after the second bridge through.
You
that
built the first
program
one.
Until the first one was.
I understand.
So immediately within the first 6 months of completion of the first one, we had secured the $100,000 engineering.
Right.
The engineering work is being done, completed, Chapter 85 review, and then once it's approved there, we can ask for the second phase of the Chapter 80, or the small bridge program, which would get us up to 600,000. So, you know, I sort of compare this to what I just read about Lennox, thinking about doing the school addition on their own.
Yeah,
Because if you wait for these programs,
That's
this
right.
is exactly what. So the
Yep.
question becomes, do you just want to fund it yourself, or do you want to get, they don't fund the 100,000 design element. You are 95% guaranteed if you follow through to get the 600,000. When you get the 600,000 is the question mark.
right.
So once again, if you're willing to wait, they're gonna pick up 600, the bridge should be about $1 million, which we had already borrowed the 400 to do the remaining costs. So we should be good to do it when it's done. But if we don't wanna wait, the way of not waiting is just fund it ourselves. And I thought that was a very interesting article about Lennox, basically saying, if they want to wait for the school, it's going to take X years, or do they just do it themselves? So, yeah.
There's some people who are happy that that bridge is still closed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And obviously Lennox has a little more.
I couldn't
discretion because of a
imagine,
certain
no.
payout that's happening, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once again, I'll be asking for just engineering. It's been very, we've been able to get ahead on a lot of engineering and other stuff. So I'm going to ask for engineering again out of free cash. And then anticipating that we get all these things lined up, then we'll be able to drop this into the regular budget for a smaller amount. But there's still a number of things that we're working on, just trying to stay ahead. Highway has put in 4 items for consideration. From the large truck to the roadside mower to the 1 ton.
A large truck costs $270,000.
Yeah, this is a large dump truck, the big one. So we only have 1 of those now. We used to have 2 and then 2 smaller. We've gone to 3 smaller and 1 big, but the 1 big is a 2013. It is 10 years old. If you really take care of the truck, do it properly, we should have been able to get 15 years out of it. But the one that we have is it's in rough shape. Whether or not we can get through another year or so, or do we drag on, another year or 2, that's sort of debate. I did list them in the order of priority because I did ask them to, but originally, I'll be honest, I said, I'm gonna support one lower one to recommend and one higher one to recommend, but give them all to me, so he gave them in that order. That would be the order he would prefer them in, if we had to make a decision.
What is it?
Am I correct in assuming no electric, gasoline engines?
Oh, those are still exempt, almost. They just haven't been able, they don't have the capability of doing what we need them to do.
What's a John Deere 3046?
It's a large mower that would be able to fit a
okay.
larger deck. The one that we have is, yeah, it can't hold, we have a deck that it can't even use, so it'd be a better one. And then the roadside one is the one that reaches over
Yeah.
the top and does it, and that's hooked to an
Clever.
older tractor, and then another one, pickup truck to replace one of our olders. And with those final four items, we'll pretty much have flipped the whole fleet into a newer fleet. And this goes back to the same thing that I want to do with the cruiser, because we're going to be doing it with the highway. Like the three other trucks we bought, we got the 7-year extended warranties on those vehicles. At the end of 7 years, we're going to make the evaluation of what condition are they in, what's the rest, and then what's the trade-in value. If we can get a high enough trade-in, then we'll trade them in. If there's not a good enough trade, but they're still running great, because we're now, I will say Hugh's done an excellent job on maintaining his fleet. They wash the trucks every day when they come in. So unless they're stuck on a project, one of their standard things is if they're back at the shop, every truck is washed. So we get the salt off, because they're running salt on the bodies. So we do have the same, but boy, you can just add life to a vehicle by doing that. So we're doing all the preventative maintenance and the rest. Then we'll make evaluations of trade-in, and that's what I'd like to do the same thing with the cruisers. What life, how many hours do they have on them? Because cruisers are a little different, you base them on hours, because they set a lot of idle time, but we're still running on the rest. What's their maintenance schedule? What's the warranties that we can get? Are there extended warranties? And then how long should we be keeping?
They don't get washed.
What's that?
Do the police cars get washed?
Yes.
We send them pretty regularly.
Oh, yeah.
It's not every day that they get washed, but we have, I'm trying to remember where they buy we get the bulk things for bringing them to the car wash. I forget which car wash they go to. And yeah, they get washed down quite often
Okay.
to try to maximize that. But, and if you're 4-year trade-in, last time we got $4,500 for the trade-in of a 4-year-old cruiser. Now I had 100,000 because they're run multiple shifts. So,
Right.
yeah, I know people think, we
Like 4
used to
years.
get a lot more,
Yeah.
but we have 8 officers and they're 24/7 operations. So
Yeah.
they do build up the mileage,
Yeah.
but it is one of those things. Should we be just looking at what it is? And then the other thing is, like when we brought Scott Muir on as an assistant, when he goes and does inspections and stuff, he has to take his own truck. So we're paying a little bit of mileage, but one of the things is, we already said, the cruiser, we saw what they give us, they want to give us 4,000 as a trade-in. We're like, no, we're not gonna, so we're gonna refit that cruiser, take the police stuff out of it, put a new tag on it and have it used by the fire department. Because that might be a better use of those vehicles instead of getting rid of them. So, there's some consideration on what we want to do with some of these.
Michael, why did we remove from this second free cash column, the roadside mower and the 1-ton truck?
I'll get to that one.
Sorry.
So the last two are the compactor, recommending painting the entire structure, bringing somebody in, sand it down, everything. It's a metal paint, so you can do it right. And then the question of the vocational tuition for the next 2 years. Do we want to consider it? Then the next page is my recommendations. And like I told you I'd only recommend 2 of his to the committee. So my recommendation is that we do the John Deere, the large truck, ask them to get through another year with the roadside and the 1-ton. And then we take free cash next year and look at those 2 as possible. Next year, we're going to have a solid return on free cash because we're going to have 1.711 million with the interest that came in from the rest of the river. So that's going to show up as a free cash for next year, plus whatever our normal free cash generation will be. So once again, we should be well over $2 million in free cash next year.
Can I just ask, going back to the highway?
Yep.
Are we rotating them enough over the years? Because forgive me, but I think last year, didn't we purchase an awful lot for the highway department?
So we've
So is
spent,
this year, should we be
Yes.
getting something right away again, or?
well, that's why I'd like to do two and then two, because I feel like, right, we're flipping over the fleet almost too fast.
Last
And
year?
that's why I want to consider as those other vehicles, like we bought two of them the same year. Well, can we space those out when we get into the future? So if we go 8 years with one, trade the other one at set, depending on what it is, to try to get them spaced out a little bit. Because that is the one thing when you flip it. The good news is that things like a John Deere or a front end loader or things like that, they can have 20 years on them. It depends on how they're used and how they're maintained. I mean, so you get in a regular maintenance program, you can really maintain those type of heavy equipment. They're not something you flip regularly.
Yeah.
Was there another hand up?
Yeah. I thought some of these items that we're dealing with were going to be included. I thought we were trying to establish a 5-year capital plan. And I'm not seeing that here.
As far as the highway, like,
Well, as far as a lot of the programs, I mean, I thought the goal was to establish a 5-year plan and then work against that plan with the pluses and minuses. And, when we're talking about all of the highway, the police and the fire department, those are major expenses. And I think it would be good if we had the people in charge of those programs try to come up with a 5-year plan. In other words, this vehicle is going to die on this year. We need to have a plan to replace it.
yeah,
And it should be, I just think it should be done over a 5-year period. That's all.
Right.
And I thought that's what we had agreed that we were working to.
So I thought so too, and that we would plan accordingly from in effect, creating a depreciation schedule so that you've got resources to meet those future obligations.
Yeah.
I think you need to think about that and.
yeah, I can.
I think it's a very
throw
good.
together, and one of the things
Excellent
that
point.
we definitely know a timeline on the new vehicles. Right now, we're running under the assumption with the highway that we're gonna go at least 7 years with the new vehicles. And then we're gonna explore whether or not, like I said, is the trade-in value high enough that it'd be a good time to trade it in? Or do we run it now the next 3 to 5 years? Because once you decide not to trade it and you're gonna hold it, then you're holding it for the next 3 to 5 years. Or you say at 7 years, if you get a good enough trade in, let's make the trade now and flip it then. So one of the issues that we have is we're still dealing with a lot of leftover equipment that we definitely have maintenance records, things like that, that I think for a while weren't done.
Right.
And that's what we're working towards. So what I will do is I will work with them to put together the replacement of the new stuff that's coming in. And then ask them to identify any of the other older stuff that we still have.
Michael, how do we make the decision between paying cash and financing versus short-term interest rates that we could take advantage of with the cash? I mean, how do we make the decision between the cash and financing?
Yeah, so, and that's a good question because like on the police cruiser, right? You can lease to own over a 3-year period. A lot of police departments do that. Typically with a vehicle, it's not huge money, but it's a few $1,000s in interest, or do you just pay it outright? And, usually it's just, seems to be.
Well, against the interest, I mean, there's pretty good short-term interest rates for putting that cash to work as well. So, I mean, it's just the net cost from an interest standpoint.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we can consider whether or not we want to, stretch. Right, if we went and borrowed for the large truck, we could definitely take a much lower, we could go 5 years out on that, borrow for the truck and then retain our free cash if that's what we're looking to do, and add that to the debt instead of the rest. If you want me to do those comparisons, we can contact the bank and run that.
Well, and I think that we have to be very conscious of over the course of the next few years is not increasing our debt limits. Or not eating into our debt limits.
Because of the high school.
Because we have some big things coming up.
Well, you know, we have the potential, of having to participate in a bond issue that might cost us somewhere between 12 and $15 million. And I know that's something that you've been thinking about
Yes.
and about saving that. So I think that, although Ed, I agree that, for instance, that large truck, this $270,000 truck, state note program is, really is something that we had discussed using before. Philosophically, spreading the cost out over a period of time means that people who come after us, who also get the benefit of these things, are paying into that cost as well. It's not all, hitting us in the first year.
It's a generational allocation.
And to some extent, yeah, I think that's true. It's a good way of putting it. I just think we need to be careful about loading up on debt over the course of the next 3 years, actually even sooner than that. It's about 2 years.
It also doesn't.
My concern is, I mean, are we depleting our free cash significantly? That puts us in a bit of a,
So free cash to me is always one of the most interesting.
Yeah.
which is something I am totally unfamiliar with.
So free cash is your annual calculation, obviously, of your excesses, first year deficiencies, or pet excesses.
I was hoping it meant what it said.
Many years, but there are good, you can have a year where you have negative free cash. And all that means is that you can't appropriate town meeting. So the closest we came was my first year here. When we had the procurement issue over the bridge, we had 2 grants, $1.5 million. And the first thing I did was make sure that we had those grants secured because we could have defaulted on the grants by not following the procurement. Which what the state would have done is until we had an appropriation, they would have slapped a negative 1.5 million on our free cash that year. So our free cash that first year would have been probably close to zero. So you would have had no ability to do that. And I know one year in North Adams, we had an airport project that was funded at 95% by the federal government. And there was a $3 million payment that missed the end of September by the feds. And we ended up with a negative free cash in that year. It doesn't matter what the negative number is. There's usually just something that needs to be corrected. But what it means is you could have no ability to do any free cash appropriation. So it's not a guarantee. There are things that can hit against free cash, a grant that we failed to do properly, a reimbursement. At the end of, and I know probably Georgia was used to this, at about May, you begin chasing every reimbursement because you have till September 30th. And if they're not in, it's a slap of negative on you. And we've had a couple small things that have hit there, but in the tens of thousands. But that one year could have resulted, that first, like I said, the first year I was here, could have resulted in, until it was cured, that could have been a negative if they had pulled those grants from us. And we would have had no appropriation for that 1.5. So it would have shown up as a negative against our free cash and we would have had none that year. So, it's free cash is when you have it. It's nice to have and that, but just understand that there are things that can hit it and that, and yeah.
Okay, Michael, anything else?
I have one question. What is the status of the fire engine pumper?
So it was ordered a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's being constructed. So it was a 24 to 36 months for full build. So, yeah,
We're
we're still
still-
at least a year
okay.
out from arrival.
All right.
Yep. And that's
Didn't
what
we
it
get
is for
hoses
those.
last year?
We purchased it last year.
I know, but didn't we also get hoses last year?
We did some upgrades of hoses, yes. And now this will.
This is more.
Yep.
These are just, I was gonna say, is this just the nozzle or is this?
Hose and
Because I thought we
nozzle. It
got
should say
hoses
hose
last
and
year.
nozzle.
Okay.
So. it
Hose and
is-
nozzle?
Yes, and he had the quote right in there for what it was gonna cost to flip over our equipment from the older ones to the newer ones. Yeah. And some of those will be ones that I'll be asking those questions because, you know, there's,
It seemed like we paid for them last year. I don't-
Any department head we should be meeting with on the capital budget at this point, or?
well, I mean, one of them, you know, one thing that right, if you didn't want to do the highway, one way of doing the highway over the next, if we were to say, because I know I talked to Peter, right, we're gonna probably see within 2 years of initial bond coming in, but I know they're gonna, right now, it looks like they're gonna do a note that you borrow as you go along as funds are needed, and then it'll really hit the following year. So we probably have about a 3-year window.
It's about a 3-year window. Yeah, the debt exclusion vote will have to be next year,
Yeah, and then.
but the actual funding is 3 years.
3 years. So we could look at, you know, something like the highway equipment and say, listen, I can get the payment on borrowing to do all of it over the next 3 years, get it in over the next 3 years, and then have it off the books by the time
That's probably safe.
we're looking at
Maybe
that.
we should meet with Hugh Page.
But that's actually, I wasn't even thinking that way because I was thinking about keeping the debt off. But that could be a good short term, and those would probably just be short-term notes that we would just do, similar to what we did with the other trucks. So I'll check into that and see what that would cost us annually over, it would just take that total payment and split it over 3 years plus whatever the interest would be, 3 years. Yeah.
Anything else, Michael?
Like I said, the CPC tab, you'll be getting an updated one because we just finalized everything 3 hours.
We could talk about that with the highway department, you know, when we meet with Hugh Page.
Stabilization, like I said, is 1.1, and then we have our water retainings and earnings. So the good one to show is probably the sewer retaining earnings, just to show everybody how it works. So we have the starting money and what we're taking in, and basically every year, if they don't appropriate the money that came in that was excess for projects for their department, then it's gonna go on this rate sheet here. And it's this column right here that he doesn't have 41,000. That gets counted toward what the rate is, because it gets treated as income for the following year. So therefore, we would have all that income, and it still shows us at the 86%, we don't need to touch the rates for sewer or water this year. But we have brought everything in now under them. So as costs go up, we're gonna see in the near future need to change those rates as we go forward. And we're only expecting, you know, as final surplus next year, bringing in that 41 of retained earnings should be about 81. That'll give them some money to use toward projects and other stuff. And as long as we keep, we're not gonna be building, you're not gonna see those $600,000 in those accounts anymore. You'll see that one of the big ones that Mike has asked, what we're thinking about is just getting a $450,000 ATM for pipeline replacement and repairs, and just pull that right out of your budget and just use the retained earnings from the water surplus, and just as things break and stuff, having the funds to just go and get them fixed. It's money that people have already paid into the water rates, so let's just, when we have issues, let's get things fixed and cleaned up, so. And that would leave them with a surplus at the end of the year of 64,000, which would be claimed as those retained earnings, so. It's, and you can see there that Mike's rates are sitting about 91% of his overall cost. If expenses are less than 85, then the rate should be lowered, and if above 100%, then we need to raise the rate. So it's just comparing what we're taking in and saying, as long as we're within this, we're not going to change the rate. So we're not changing it every year, but if it gets to the point that it's now above or below consistently, we will change the rates.
Do they, have they had any discussion in the sewer water commission about about extending sewers.
So actually, their last meeting, they actually had the first prioritization discussion.
Yeah.
And I think it might be up on CTSB, but it actually, people tuned into that, and it was the first presentation by the initial evaluation looking at around the lake, everything. And a lot of that was, they did bring in, which I thought they would have to do, and they do, they'd have to bring in pump stations to lift from the lower up and then gravity feed it back, which obviously pushes costs. You know, each pump station, I believe, was about 1.1 million. So if you want to do those type of improvements, that's.
But it's primarily focused around the lake.
No, it includes the I around the rest of the town, and then expansion
Right.
and what should be our priorities. So,
But that's another example of, as they get closer to some sort of sense of what they would like to do, doing this kind of 5-year forward plan so that we can gradually pay for it.
yeah, and that's what sewer is doing.
Yeah. Okay.
They're proposing, that's what it's being put together for, and we brought in engineers to do that.
Because it's going to be really expensive.
Yeah, what we need is, what I'm hearing right now is we need a 5-year fleet plan for the vehicles specifically.
Mhm.
And then probably a separate one to begin looking at buildings and,
Yeah.
not that we have a lot of buildings, but I
Right.
know there's a couple of things that need to come up here. But we are pursuing every grant funding. We're looking at whether or not we can get these are individual heat
pumps.
And there's, I forget how many in this building because they were made to run around.
141.
Thank you.
You're kidding.
I was gonna say I have a list, but I didn't know the number off the hand.
I think so.
Yeah, and we're trying to get a green, that these are old, they're 17 years old.
Yeah.
And if the efficiency's high enough, we might be able to get a green communities grant to replace these. Because we've been having to replace some this year as we've gone along. So
What would we replace them with?
with newer heat pumps. So
Newer heat
this is overall
More efficient.
an efficient system because we had to replace the geothermal with gas, natural gas, but we only heat the water to 70 degrees because the groundwater being pulled up was in the upper 60s, then pulled through the heat pumps in order to generate heat. So what we did is we used the furnaces to replicate the geothermal because of correct me, Georgia, because you were here, it's because of the piping, we didn't use copper. We used the plastic to move
The issue was that we were pulling up silt.
right, but
It wasn't that
the reason
we were-
why we can't go to a high, just use the boilers downstairs to pump hot water is
Yeah.
instead of copper in the wall,
Yeah.
use a plastic so we can't let the temperature get above 100.
That's true.
Because you'll actually melt the pipes in the wall. That's why we have a cooling tower out back.
That's correct.
And it's because we had to retrofit a geothermal system.
Because this building was not built for a fossil fuel
Right.
heating system,
Yeah.
I think,
nor was it really built for the geothermal.
The only other thing I'd like to just bring up is the fact
Yeah,
this year's budget, one major item is the compactor, because in October, when we had to update the newer rates,
Yeah.
we are looking at about a 40,000 to 50,000 shortfall in the compactor, because we went from 92 to 128. So on that tonnage, and our overall tonnage is up 22%. So we have more people using the dump than ever, and we have a higher cost to get rid of. And that is going to be a request to come from the reserve account. We still have 12,000. We paid 8 bills. We're going to run out of money on the next bill. So I just wanted the finance committee to be aware of that one. If you want me, I can bring it to the next meeting that we have to make a request. Because we can project forward, what we think the cost will be, or if you're just fine with me doing it at the end of the season, then but I wanted you guys to be
we
aware. It is
budgeted
a
money,
large
we
one.
budgeted reserve account money, yeah.
Oh, yeah, same 150,000,
It's
but
150,000.
for something to hit as 40 or 50 on its own is very unusual. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of it.
Well, and that's a good cause for using the reserve fund because it's necessity
Yeah,
rather than all these other little things that
This
trickle
is,
down. at the
this
end
is
of
a
the
good
year.
one.
We're cleaning up that
Yeah,
That very much this year has been a focus of mine to not bring those littler items.
Very good, thank you.
Yes.
I have one quick question. I know
Yes.
everybody wants to go home. Is any of our fund and stabilization designated?
No,
Okay,
no. But would be looking to add a bridge one to it.
bridge one.
500 and then
Mhm.
you can always transfer the money, even if it isn't a dedicated, you can still
Right.
town meeting appropriate it, pull it out and put it in anything
But I didn't know
else.
if any of that 1.1 is designated already, but it's not, so.
it is 7:27. If there is no further business, I would like to call for an adjournment.
So moved.
Nice.
Thank you very much, everybody. What a follow. Thank you,
Thank
Michael.
you.
Yep.